Welcome to the Black Gay History Channel. Please share this video and subscribe to this channel for more captivating content. Now, I was always under the impression that when it came to historic black films that depicted slavery and that African colonial era, that there were no films that ever depicted gay storylines between black men. And it turns out I was wrong. I always knew that I'd enjoy watching The Feast of All Saints just by the cover of the film I'd seen in passing throughout the years, but I had never seen the movie, nor knew too much about it until now. Now I see why Feast of All Saints isn't as celebrated and referenced like other black American slave films and TV shows like Roots, Glory, or 12 Years a Slave, or Rosewood. I always figured this movie isn't referenced as much as great films about slavery because it had either taboo topics like voodoo or gay subject matters. And I was right, because this TV miniseries has both. While these topics are seen as taboo by both black and Christian Americans, I love these topics, and after watching I realized the characters mirror my own family stories from the same era, which made me identify with the characters even more. Feast of All Saints tells the intimate life stories of several black mixed and Creole Louisianians, or gens de couleur libre, near the end of slavery, who descended from Haiti, particularly a family of mixed free people who worked at attaining respectability by having children with white men and denying their African roots to climb the social ladder in Southern society. It should come as no surprise that gay characters and voodoo storylines are in this book turned miniseries, because the original book was written by Anne Rice in 1979. Anne Rice is the author who brought us another great and gay historic drama based in Louisiana, Interview with a Vampire. This series stars the millennial black American heartthrob Robert Richard as Marcel St. Marie, a young man coming of age in the mid-19th century who has grown up as a relatively privileged mixed youth because of his white father, who was a slave owner. Now, if you were a black kid growing up in the 90s and millennium that liked boys, then there's a 99.9% chance you had a crush on Robert Richard. He was everywhere in black media, from sitcoms like One-on-One to My Cousin Skeeter to Coach Carter, and he's still just as gorgeous now as he was then. He was perfect to play this bright-eyed and bushy-tailed Marcel, who slowly begins to realize his life of privilege has come with family secrets and terrible consequences. One interesting thing I learned watching this film is how young black mixed debutantes in those days were called quadroons and were raised to be kept women for white men. And it was seen as somewhat socially acceptable for mixed women to be kept mistresses of rich white slave owners, as long as they stayed out of the way of the white wives. When Marcel is dining with his family, conversation comes up of an author who grew up in his hometown, who Marcel admires, named Kristoff Mercier. And when the other adults mention him and his reputation, my gay spidey senses immediately started to go off. This author, who had left town to travel the world, was said by one of the elders at the table to be leading a bohemian lifestyle with a rich British man who he traveled with and had him kept. Now, between the word bohemian, which is an old term for artists and actors and code for gay people, and them using the term kept, it was clear that this elder was explaining to Marcel that this British man was Kristoff's lover, and clearly Marcel got what his elder was putting down. Before hearing news of Kristoff's return back to their hometown, Marcel is also slowly beginning to realize that he isn't as separated from slavery as he thinks he is. Marcel was raised in the delusion that he came from all free black people who fought for the Haitian Revolution. But before long, he realizes that he's more closely related to slavery than he knew. There's so many black icons in this movie. James Earl Jones plays the narrator, the older version of Marcel, reflecting on his life. Pam Grier plays in this film, and TV icon Jasmine Guy plays Matron Mercier, who encounters Marcel in the marketplace and asks him to read letters to her about her son Kristoff, who left for Paris. When Marcel reads the letters and assures her that her son is coming back to town, she seduces the young Marcel, and the two wake up naked in bed right on time to meet Kristoff, back from his travels. You cannot tell me his mother didn't plan that entire event to a T. She knew her son would be back, and he was right on time to catch them in bed, and it was clear he seemed more jealous that she was with Marcel, and not that some young man was in bed with his mother. Kristoff's mother likely heard all the rumors about her son's travels and his British lover, and wanted to get to Marcel before her son could. Kristoff is played by Daniel Senjata, a gorgeous actor who I've actually mentioned on the channel before. This is not his only important gay historical movie role either. In 2003, he'd received a Tony Award nomination for playing a gay athlete who comes out to the media in the off-Broadway play Take Me Out. And the next year, he'd play the role of the iconic queer Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes in the historic gay film Brother to Brother. In the next scene, while Kristoff is lying with a woman in bed, his love interest, he admits to her that, quote, "I met a boy today who is still beautiful." And though he likely meant this as he still had a beautiful spirit, it's clear there was more there. And she tells him, "When you were away, there were rumors. Is your interest in Marcel? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?" He asks back, "I don't know, are you jealous?" He then proceeds saying, "How can I feel how I do for you?" And she interrupts him saying, "And Marcel." She replies, "You are with me tonight." This is just another example of men and women knowing that even then, sexuality is fluid, and there were likely many conversations happening like this throughout time in the past. I thought initially that this film would just dance around the gay tension between Marcel and Kristoff, but I was wrong. After Marcel goes through the trauma of realizing his white father, with a separate white family, had changed his will and refused to send him to school in Paris, Marcel breaks a huge boundary and attempts to confront his slave master father at his home, and his father stops him before he can meet his estranged white family and whips and beats him. After making a huge scene at his father's house and healing his wounds at home, Marcel runs to Kristoff and begs to be with him as a mentor, but also sexually and romantically. And though it's clear Kristoff is attracted to Marcel, he knows that a part of Marcel wanting this relationship is because he's so disappointed in his own father. While Kristoff admits he was lovers with the man in England, he would rather Marcel heal and find his own way instead of leaning on Kristoff, which I think is commendable. It would have been easy for Kristoff to take advantage of the young, heartbroken Marcel, but instead he decided to be his mentor and support him through his trouble. I loved in this Black historic film, we actually have an interesting and wise bisexual character, and I'm so disappointed I'm just now seeing this fantastic film. Earlier this year, I found even more of my family's Jamaican history than I knew before, including even more names and pictures of ancestors I'd never seen, some Black and some white, some even as far back as the 1700s, and I was gagged. I even found a picture of my great-grandfather, a well-established mixed man in Jamaica in the early 1900s that my grandmother told me about when I was a teenager in Jamaica. To hear about him was one thing, but to see a picture of him and other ancestors for the first time was a whole other surreal moment. Black American and Caribbean history and generational trauma portrayed in this movie, and movies like it, are incredibly accurate because I now see these same dynamics in my own family tree. This film goes into depth into the world of colorism and how equality through mixed race ancestry was really based on a lie. Marcel and other mixed people in this story consistently realize their surviving in their society is all based on selling their dignity to white men around them, whether that be morally or even sexually. Many women in this story realize the harsh realities of both racism and the oppression of women throughout this movie as well. TV icons like Bianca Lawson plays integral parts in this film, and even Hollywood starlet Eartha Kitt plays the insidious voodoo woman who runs a brothel and lays a terrible trap for one of the young women in Marcel's family who can pass for white. Even the white men with all the power seem to be miserable under the strict rules of white patriarchy and the oppression of Africans, and we are still having to live with the horrible effects of this system today. Have y'all checked out the miniseries Feast of All Saints yet? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.